I hired Steve Johnson to mow my lawn on a quiet Tuesday morning while my daughter Kate was already gone for work. Less than an hour later, my phone rang, and he whispered, "Mr. Sullivan, I don't want to alarm you, but is there anyone else living in this house?" My hand went numb around the coffee mug. "What do you mean?" I asked, even as I got that sick feeling in my gut. "There's crying," he said softly, "from your basement, and it doesn't sound like a TV." That was the moment I realized my home was hiding something I was never meant to find. I'm Gregory Sullivan, 63 years old, retired aerospace engineer from Boeing. What I discovered that day changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Tuesday mornings were supposed to be quiet. After 35 years designing flight control systems for commercial aircraft, I'd learned to treasure the stillness of retirement. The calm before my weekly golf game with the guys from my old engineering department before grocery shopping. Before the routine that kept me busy since Margaret passed 10 years ago, I stood in the kitchen of the house on Maple Ridge Lane, the two-story colonial Margaret and I had bought 28 years ago when Kate was 5 and Rachel was newborn, back when the girls' laughter bounced off these walls and Margaret hummed while tending her herb garden by the back window. Those days were long gone now. These days it was just me and my oldest daughter, Kate. She's 33, brilliant and driven, runs her own art gallery downtown. She'd transformed our basement into a studio space for her jewelry business about 3 years back. Rachel, my younger daughter, had supposedly moved to California 9 years ago to pursue her design career. We'd lost touch gradually, the way families sometimes do when kids spread their wings. She'd be 28 now. The house felt too big for one person, but it was still home. I poured a second cup of coffee, dark roast from the place on University Avenue, and checked the clock above the stove. 7:34. My golf game wasn't until 2 o'clock. Plenty of time to review the morning news, maybe call Phil Anderson about updating my will, possibly tinker with the vintage radio I'd been restoring in the garage. Then my phone rang. Steve Johnson's name lit up the screen. Steve had mowed our lawn every Tuesday for 4 years, steady as clockwork, never caused any trouble. He was the kind of guy who took pride in his work, showed up on time, cleaned up after himself. If Steve was calling, something was definitely wrong. "Mr. Sullivan?" His voice had that careful tone people use when they're afraid of bothering you. "I'm real sorry to call, but there's something out here I think you should hear." I set down the coffee pot. 35 years working on aircraft systems had taught me to pay attention when someone sounded concerned. In my line of work, small problems had a way of becoming big disasters if you ignored them. "What's going on, Steve?" "I'm mowing the front yard and I keep hearing this sound. Sounds like it's coming from your basement, like somebody crying." The mower rumbled faintly in the background. "It's been going on for a bit now, real soft like they don't want to be heard. I thought maybe you had company or something, but your car's the only one in the driveway." I moved to the window. Steve stood beside his red Toro mower, phone pressed to his ear, staring toward the basement windows that sat just above ground level. Kate had left for downtown at 7 o'clock sharp, same as every Tuesday. The house was empty, except for me. "I'll check it out," I said, already heading for the basement stairs. "Thanks, Mr. Sullivan. I didn't want to ignore it, you know. Better safe than sorry." That was Steve. Good guy. Responsible. If he was hearing something, there was definitely something to hear. The basement stairs creaked under my feet. 16 steps I'd walked thousands of times over the years. I'd installed those steps myself when we moved in, back when I still did weekend projects around the house. Today, each one felt different somehow. Heavier. At the bottom, I stopped and listened. Nothing at first, just the familiar hum of the furnace and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. The basement was my domain. I had my workbench down there, Storage for my tools, boxes of old aircraft manuals I couldn't bring myself to throw away. Kate's studio occupied the far end of the basement, a space we'd renovated together 3 years earlier. I'd helped her plan the electrical layout, installed proper lighting, built custom shelving for her supplies. We'd worked side by side for weeks, me teaching her about load calculations and circuit breakers, her showing me about color theory and artistic composition. It was good father-daughter time, reminded me of when she was little and wanted to help me fix everything around the house. I opened the studio door. Everything looked normal at first glance. Her work table stretched across the center of the room, maybe 8 feet long, tools arranged with the kind of precision I appreciated. Display cases lined the walls, filled with silver pendants and gold chains that caught the track lighting. Custom pieces that had earned her a loyal following of collectors and a successful gallery downtown. But something felt off. In my engineering days, I'd learned to trust that feeling. When something doesn't look right on a blueprint or a system readout, you investigate. You don't assume everything's fine just because it looks fine on the surface. I stepped closer to the work table and noticed a drinking glass sitting near the edge, condensation still clinging to its sides. I touched it. Cold, recently filled. The wall clock read 7:43. Kate had left at 7 o'clock sharp. I'd watched her pull out of the driveway. I scanned the room more carefully, the way I used to scan instrument panels looking for anomalies. The small sink in the corner had water droplets around the faucet. A faint scent of lavender soap hung in the air. Fresh soap smell, not old residue. Then my eyes settled on the back wall. The paint looked right, same dove gray as the rest of the studio. But something about the texture bothered me. It was smoother somehow, newer, like someone had patched and repainted a section recently. In my line of work, you learn to notice when things don't match the original specifications. I pressed my hand against the wall and knocked lightly with my knuckles. The sound that came back was wrong. Hollow. Empty. Like there was space behind it instead of solid foundation. "Mr. Sullivan?" I turned around. Steve stood at the bottom of the stairs, his work gloves twisted in his hands. He looked uncomfortable, like he was second-guessing his decision to call me. "Find anything?" he asked. "Just checking things out," I replied, though honestly I wasn't sure what I was checking for. "I heard it clear as day," he said, his eyes drifting toward that back wall. "A woman crying, soft like she was trying not to be noticed. Could sound carry from somewhere else, maybe? A neighbor?" "Maybe," I said, but neither of us really believed that. I'd designed acoustic systems for aircraft cabins. I knew how sound traveled through structures. What Steve heard was coming from inside my house, not from next door. A car door slammed outside. Heels clicked on the driveway above us. Kate's footsteps, quick and purposeful. She appeared at the top of the stairs a moment later, surprise flickering across her face when she saw both of us standing there. "Dad, Steve, what's going on?" "Steve heard something while he was mowing," I said, looking up at her. "We were just checking it out." "Crying," Steve added, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Sorry to bother you, Miss Sullivan. I didn't want to ignore it." Kate laughed, but it sounded forced. "Oh, that must have been my podcast. I worked late on a custom piece last night and had true crime playing while I sketched. You know how those shows get. Lots of emotional interviews. Crying families." She gestured vaguely toward her work table. "I probably forgot to shut it off before heading upstairs." Steve's shoulders relaxed. "That would explain it. I'm real sorry I worried you folks." "Don't apologize," Kate said, but I caught something in her voice, a tightness. "Dad's always telling me I work too late. Maybe this is a sign I should start shutting things down earlier." "What brought you back?" I asked. "Thought you had that appointment downtown." "I do," she said too quickly. But I forgot my presentation portfolio. You know how scattered I get when I'm nervous about big clients. She started down the stairs. Red leather folder on the shelf by the window. I'll just grab it and go. I'll get it, I said, moving toward the shelf. Dad, you don't have to. It's no trouble. Something made me want to watch her reaction. In my Boeing days, I'd learned to watch people's faces when systems weren't working right. Engineers have tells, just like poker players. I found the red folder exactly where she said it would be, but as I handed it to her, I noticed her hands were shaking slightly. Just a tremor, but enough to catch my attention. Thanks. She clutched the folder against her chest. I should run. Mrs. Hendricks doesn't like to be kept waiting, and this commission could really put the gallery on the map. She headed back upstairs, calling over her shoulder. Steve, thanks for being so thoughtful. And Dad, remember to take your blood pressure medication. We listened to her heels click across the kitchen floor, then the front door closing. A few seconds later, her car started up and pulled away. Steve looked at me. Well, mystery solved, I guess. Yeah, I said, but something still bothered me. Thanks for letting me know, Steve. Better safe than sorry. Absolutely, Mr. Sullivan. I'll get back to the mowing now. After he left, I stood alone in Kate's studio. The podcast. Explanation made sense. True crime shows were popular, and Kate did work late sometimes. But that water glass was still cold. The soap smell was still fresh. And that section of wall still sounded hollow when I knocked on it. I pulled out my phone and called Phil Anderson, my lawyer and one of my oldest friends. We'd known each other since college, before I went into aerospace and he went into law. Phil had handled Margaret's estate, helped me set up Rachel's trust fund, taken care of all the legal stuff I never wanted to think about. Greg, he answered on the second ring. What's going on? Phil, I need you to pull the records on Rachel's trust fund, the one Margaret set up before she died. Sure, but why? Something wrong? Maybe. I just want to see the transaction history. Kate's been the trustee since Rachel disappeared, and I'm starting to wonder about some things. There was a pause. Greg, you sound worried. What kind of things? I told him about the water glass, the soap smell, the hollow wall. About Kate's explanation and the way her hands shook when she took the folder. Phil listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I liked about him. He knew how to let people talk. I'll pull everything tomorrow morning, he said when I finished. Transaction logs, withdrawal records, all of it. But Greg, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, I don't know what I'm thinking yet. That's why I need to see the numbers. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed Margaret and I had shared for 23 years, staring at the ceiling and thinking about that wall in Kate's studio. In my engineering career, I'd investigated plenty of structural failures. You start with what you can observe, then you dig deeper until you find the cause. Margaret used to say I overthought everything. Not everything is a Boeing 747, Greg, she'd tease when I'd analyze some minor household problem like I was troubleshooting a hydraulic system. But that methodical approach had served me well for 35 years. It kept planes in the air and passengers safe. Around 2:15 a.m., I heard something. A soft creak from downstairs, the kind of sound old houses make when someone moves carefully. I'd lived in this house long enough to know all its sounds. This wasn't the furnace kicking on or the house settling. This was footsteps. I should have gotten up, should have crept down those 16 steps and seen for myself what was happening in my basement at 2 a.m. But I didn't. Instead, I lay there listening to my own heartbeat and wondering when I'd become an old man who was afraid of his own house. The next morning, Phil called at 7:30. Greg, you need to come to my office, right now. What did you find? Not over the phone. How fast can you get here? 20 minutes later, I sat across from Phil's desk, looking at spreadsheets and bank statements scattered across the mahogany surface. He looked older than I remembered, more gray at the temples, deeper lines around his eyes. "You remember the trust fund Margaret set up?" he said without preamble. $500,000 from her life insurance and savings. Rachel was supposed to gain access when she turned 21, but when she disappeared, you made Kate the temporary trustee. Right. We thought it was the responsible thing to do. Phil slid a highlighted spreadsheet toward me. Kate's been withdrawing money, a lot of it. March 28th, 2016. $50,000. April 15th, 2016, $50,000. May 3rd, 2016, $50,000. $150,000 in 3 months, Phil said quietly. All transferred to someone named Anthony Martinez. The name rang a bell. Kate's boyfriend from college. They'd dated for about 2 years before she graduated. That's just the beginning, Phil continued. Another document followed. Smaller withdrawals, but consistent. $2,000 here, $5,000 there, spread out over years. Roughly $350,000 total over 9 years. My hand started shaking as I looked at the numbers. My daughter had been systematically draining her sister's trust fund for nearly a decade. There's more, Phil said, pulling out invoices and receipts. $100,000 to something called Rodriguez Construction, based in Iowa, listed as home renovation. I looked up at him. We haven't done any major renovations. I know. I checked with the city. No permits filed at your address in over 10 years. The room felt like it was spinning. I gripped the edge of the desk. Greg, Phil said gently, we need to consider the possibility that Kate knows exactly what happened to Rachel. I drove home in a fog. $350,000. Nearly Rachel's entire inheritance, gone. Money Margaret had saved and sacrificed for, intended to give our younger daughter a good start in life. And Kate had been taking it, piece by piece, for 9 years. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Bigger, somehow, emptier. Like I was seeing it for the first time and realizing I didn't know it as well as I thought. I went straight to Kate's home office, Margaret's old sewing room. Kate kept everything organized in there, her business files, tax records, personal paperwork. If there were answers to be found, they'd be in that room. I'd never gone through my daughter's things before. It felt wrong, like a violation of trust. But then again, trust was exactly what we were talking about here, wasn't it? The filing cabinet wasn't locked. I opened the bottom drawer and found what I was looking for, an accordion folder labeled Household/Grocery in Kate's precise handwriting. Inside were hundreds of receipts, organized by date, going back 3 years. I spread them across her glass desk. Target receipts, Cub Foods receipts, Walmart receipts. All normal enough until I started reading the details. March 2nd, 2024. $187. Canned soup, 12 cans. Pasta, 8 boxes. Rice, 3 bags. Bottled water, 224 packs. Granola bars, peanut butter, vitamins. Then personal care items. Shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, 3 tubes, deodorant. And at the bottom, always ultra-thin pads, size 2, $24.99. That last item stopped me cold. Kate had gotten an IUD 3 years ago. I remembered because she'd mentioned it when we were updating her health insurance coverage. So why was she buying feminine products every month? I grabbed my calculator. Average $200 per week, 52 weeks a year, 3 years. Over $31,000 on groceries. Kate barely ate at home. She had client dinners most nights, business lunches, coffee meetings. Half the food in our refrigerator went bad because nobody was there to eat it, unless somebody else was eating it. That evening, Kate came home glowing. Dad, I got the Hendricks commission. 3 custom pieces for their anniversary. It's going to put the gallery on the map. I made dinner while she talked about clients and networking opportunities. Chicken marsala, her favorite since she was a kid. We sat down to eat, and I waited until she'd relaxed with her wine before bringing up the groceries. I've been looking at our household expenses, I said casually. Noticed our grocery bill has gone up quite a bit over the past few years. She looked up from her plate. Has it? I hadn't really noticed. About $200 a week. I figured you must be hosting client events here. Oh, absolutely. Her answer came quickly. Private viewings for VIP clients. Wine, cheese, fancy crackers. You know how it is. You have to spend money to make money. Her voice was smooth, confident, but I noticed her knuckles had gone white around her fork. Makes sense, I said, though I noticed a lot of personal care items on the receipts. Feminine products, specifically. 3 seconds of silence. In my engineering days, I'd learned that hesitation usually meant someone was calculating their response. Bulk buying, Dad. It's cheaper that way. I thought you had an IUD. Another pause. Do, but I keep supplies on hand for clients. Sometimes women need something in an emergency. It's good hospitality. Every answer was perfectly reasonable on the surface, but that vein pulsing at her temple told a different story. You're very thoughtful, I said. She relaxed slightly. I try to be. We finished dinner talking about her business plans, the Hendricks commission, the weather. All perfectly normal. Kate went upstairs around 9 o'clock. Big day tomorrow, she said, kissing my cheek. Good night, Dad. Good night, sweetheart. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I went down to the basement one more time. The studio was dark. I didn't turn on the lights, just used the flashlight on my phone. I made my way to that back wall, the one that sounded hollow when I knocked on it. I pressed my ear against the painted drywall and held my breath. For 30 seconds, nothing. Just the distant hum of the furnace upstairs. Then I heard it. Breathing. Quiet, careful, like someone trying not to make any sound at all. Rachel, I whispered. The breathing stopped instantly. Dead silence. Rachel, I whispered again. If you can hear me, I'm going to get you out of there. A sound came from behind the wall, soft, broken, like crying. Footsteps creaked overhead. Kate's bedroom door opening. I stepped back from the wall and headed for the stairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, that soft crying continued. My daughter, my baby girl. 20 feet away, separated by drywall and 9 years of lies. Tomorrow, I was going to bring her home. The next morning, I called Phil at 6 a.m. I need you to find Daniel Rodriguez, that contractor from Iowa, I said. The one who got $100,000 from Kate. I want to talk to him today. Greg, what's going on? You sound different. Rachel's alive, Phil. She's in my basement. Kate's been keeping her there for 9 years. Silence on the other end. Then, Jesus Christ, are you sure? I heard her breathing. She responded when I said her name. My voice cracked. My baby girl is 20 feet below my bedroom, and I've been sleeping above her for 9 years without knowing it. Phil didn't question me further. Rodriguez is flying in this afternoon. He says he's been carrying guilt about that job for years. Apparently your call spooked him enough to come clean. By 2 p.m., I was sitting across from Daniel Rodriguez in Phil's conference room. He was maybe 50, weathered hands, the kind of guy who'd worked with tools his whole life. But his eyes looked haunted. March 2016, he began. Your daughter contacted me through Craigslist. She wanted a hidden room built in a basement, soundproofed, with locks on the outside. She said it was a safe room for valuables, and that you were getting forgetful in your old age. My jaw clenched. Kate had used my age against me, made this man think I was some confused old-timer who needed to be protected from himself. She offered 15,000 cash, no permits, no paperwork. My wife was dying of cancer, and the medical bills were killing us. Rodriguez's voice broke. I told myself it was just rich people being weird, but I knew. Deep down, I knew something was wrong. He described the construction in detail. A false wall creating a 15 by 12-foot space, steel door with deadbolt, basic plumbing, ventilation connected to the house system, soundproof foam on every surface. It took 3 weeks. She said you were in Europe on business. When I finished, she paid me in cash and made me promise never to mention the work to anyone. When did you realize what you'd really built? Phil asked. 2020. I saw a news story about a missing girl named Rachel Sullivan. I recognized the name, started wondering. But I was terrified. If I came forward, I'd be admitting I helped build a prison. Rodriguez looked at me with tears in his eyes. Mr. Sullivan, if I'd known what she was planning, I never would have taken that job. I've been carrying this guilt for years. That evening, Kate had another gallery event. She left at 6 p.m., dressed in her best business attire, talking about potential investors and networking opportunities. She kissed my cheek at the door. Don't wait up, Dad. These things usually run late. Have fun, sweetheart. As soon as her car disappeared, I went to the garage and got my crowbar. I'd had enough of being careful, enough of gathering evidence. My daughter needed me. The basement was quiet. I flipped on all the lights in Kate's studio and stood before that false wall. Somewhere behind it, Rachel was waiting. Rachel, I called out. I'm coming to get you. Stand back from the wall. I swung the crowbar hard. The drywall cracked on the first hit. On the third, it gave way completely. Behind it was exactly what Rodriguez had described, a narrow space with a steel door. The door was locked, but the crowbar made quick work of the mechanism. When it swung open, the smell hit me. First, stale air, disinfectant, the scent of a space that had been lived in but never properly aired. I shined my flashlight inside. The room was small, cramped. A narrow bed, a tiny desk, a chemical toilet in the corner. The walls were covered with drawings, hundreds of them. Birds, trees, landscapes, and portraits. Dozens of portraits of me, drawn from memory. On the bed, shielding her eyes from the light, was Rachel. She was thin, too thin. Her hair was long and tangled. But it was definitely her. My baby girl, 28 years old now, looking like she hadn't seen sunlight in a decade. Dad! Her voice was barely a whisper. I dropped the crowbar and ran to her. I'm here, baby, I'm here. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing. I knew you'd come. I drew your face every day so I wouldn't forget. I knew you'd find me. I held her while she cried, this grown woman who was still my little girl. I'm so sorry it took me so long. I'm so sorry. You're here now, she whispered. That's what matters. I helped her out of that terrible room and upstairs to the kitchen. The first thing she asked for was to see the sky. We sat on the back porch, and she cried just from feeling fresh air on her face. The police came, the paramedics came. The whole neighborhood came out to watch as they loaded Kate into a police car. She looked at me through the back window, her face streaming with tears. I did it for us, Dad, she called out. I was trying to keep our family together. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. At the trial, 6 months later, the full story came out. Kate had staged a fake car accident with a mannequin and theatrical blood. She'd convinced Rachel that she'd killed someone, then offered to help by hiding her until things blew over. For 9 years, Kate had used Rachel's jewelry designs to build her gallery business while keeping her sister locked in that room. The judge gave Kate 25 years, Anthony Martinez got 8 years for conspiracy. Rodriguez testified for the prosecution in exchange for probation. Today, Rachel runs an art therapy center for trauma survivors. She's healthy again, strong again. There's real light in her eyes now, not just the desperate hope that kept her alive in that room. As for me, I learned something important. Love without vigilance isn't protection, it's negligence. Trust without verification can become complicity in evil. I almost lost my daughter not because I didn't love her enough, but because I trusted the wrong person too much. Don't be like me. Don't assume the people closest to you are incapable of harm. Don't ignore warning signs because confrontation feels uncomfortable. And never stop fighting for the people you love, even when the fight is against someone you love. At 63, I thought my protecting days were over. I was wrong. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to look the other way, even when looking hurts more than you can imagine. That's a lesson worth remembering. No matter how old you get. Because the hardest truth I learned at 63 is this: the people who can hurt your family the most are the ones you'd never suspect, the ones who sit at your dinner table and call you dad. Don't let love make you blind, and don't let age make you weak. Because the moment you stop being your family's protector is the moment someone else decides their fate.